Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we're going to carry on from the first part of Kitab al-Mu'amalat, right? This is a chapter on transactions, and so far we've been looking at Imam al-Huti's work covering the conditions of validity for sales. And we've talked about a handful of those or so, and we've got a couple more to discuss hopefully this evening to wrap up this particular section, and then move on after that into stipulations of contracts and then various different structures. Okay, so to begin here, where we left off, Imam al-Huti rahimahullah ta'ala says, وَلَا يُبَاعُ غير المساكن مما فتح عنوة كأرض مصر والشام ونحوهما بل تؤجر ولا رباع مكة ولا تؤجر ولا نقع بئر وكلأ ونحوه قبل حوزه ويملكه آخذه. Okay, so here he says, apart from the residences, he says لا يباع, meaning they're not to be sold. Apart from the residences, غير المساكن مما فتح عنوة, and we're talking about here that which is conquered. Okay, lands that were taken by way of conquest of sorts through military campaigns. Okay, that's what that means. Like he says, giving us an example of that, the lands of Egypt and Greater Syria, the Sham, etc. They cannot be sold, but may be rented. Then it goes on and he says, وَلَا رِبَاعُ مَكَّةِ, meaning the dwellings of Mecca cannot be sold, وَلَا تُؤْجَرْ, or rented. So we're talking about lands that have been opened. That's how we refer to it in Islam. They've been opened. And we're talking about lands that have a special designation. So let's look at that now, then we'll jump into a few more items he mentions here. So Islamic law places certain restrictions on selling land as well as natural resources, because he goes on and talks about that. He says well water, pasture, and the like cannot be sold before they are possessed. And they become owned by whoever acquires them. And we'll look at the details on that. So we're talking about the restrictions on some lands, natural resources, particularly the lands that are conquered and the lands that remain in communal use. They have a special status in Islam. So first we look at the lands that are conquered. So as I mentioned, this is through military campaigns, that lands that were not divided among the conquerors. They weren't divided and given, but they were retained as public assets, and they were held in trust for the community. They were designated essentially as a waqf. Okay, and you'll find this happen during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, where he took vast land masses and made them an endowment for the Muslim community, so that the ummah would benefit from their return. They're retained for the use of its inhabitants, who are going to be paying an annual tax. Essentially what happens is, that's how they generate wealth needed to operate the affairs of the state, to take care of the services for the people. It's through this annual land tax, which is known as kharaj. And that's something that we talked about briefly in the military campaign section of the book. Briefly hinted at that. So the rulings associated with this, number one, is that these lands cannot be sold outright as a baseline ruling. They cannot be sold outright. They may be leased to individuals or groups for productive use. Productive use would be like farming or housing. So you could go rent the land or lease the land, and then you could farm the land. All right? Or you could lease the land from the state, and you can build a home on the land. And you could live there. You would own the farm, like you would have rights to the produce, and you would own the house. That would be your property. It's just the land is being leased that it's upon. Again, it serves as a communal trust for all Muslims under the oversight of the state or the governing authority. Okay, so this doesn't include homes which can be bought and sold. It's very different between the land and the homes, to make a distinction. They can be bought and sold along with other property improvements, as I mentioned, like farms or orchards with certain conditions. So in the event that a land was conquered and it was already a farm, well, then the state owns the farm and they have the rights to the farm. But if it's just a barren land, they can lease that plot, and then whoever leased it has the rights to the farm that they plant, or the orchard, or whatever it may be. So that gives you kind of an idea of what we're looking at there as an introductory kind of coverage of sorts, as an introduction to the topic. The next thing he mentions is properties in Mecca, because Mecca has a sacred status. The residents, the homes, and the lands in Mecca cannot be sold or rented due to the sacred and communal nature of the city. This prohibition stems from the preservation of Mecca as a sanctuary, which is to remain open to all Muslims, free from commercialization. As the Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا تباع رباؤها ولا تكره بيوتها. The residents of Mecca cannot be sold or rented. This is narrated by Al-Athram. So the application of this is that property owners in Mecca may allow pilgrims to use their homes, but they cannot charge, rent, or sell those properties. If someone were to stay there and give something out of goodwill, then they could accept that. However, the concept is that the land, the sanctuary, is to be open for everyone. And this ruling extends to other religious areas of religious significance, such as in the Haram, such as places like Mina and Muzdalifah, where commercial use is prohibited to maintain accessibility as well as its sanctity. Okay? Though this is the baseline rule, of course, much like selling the land of a waqf, it's under the authority or the care of the authorities who may, under certain circumstances, with certain conditions, sell some of that land, perhaps for like improvements on the land that the state could not manage themselves. And the only way they can get those improvements made is to sell it so that it can be then developed further. So there may be some exceptions to the rule here, because the person might be going, well, wait a minute, what happened to that? Right, so the general rule is that they remain as they are, a waqf, and they remain free, the sanctuary remains free of commercialization. And some of this stuff's not really applied. It's not really applied today for whatever reason. I'm not well versed in historical, dynamics of what happened over a period of time. And this is not the only opinion, by the way. That's another thing to remember. This is not the only opinion that's out there among the scholars. So some may adhere to different schools of thought and have arrived at different conclusions here. The next thing we're looking at in this section is shared natural resources. So the resources that we're talking about, as mentioned by the Imam explicitly, is well water, pasture land, and also mentioned by some of the great Imams, firewood. These are all shared communal assets. Like you might find anywhere out in the open land, you would find a well, you would find pasture where you would send your animals to eat. You would find firewood for you to be able to cook and warm your homes. They cannot be sold unless they're physically acquired. What he was talking about here is you can't sell the well and the water until you've pulled it you can't sell water from the well until you've pulled it out yourself. You go and you drop the bucket, you pull it out, you bottle it up, and then you sell it. Okay, that's what he says possession is when the person takes hold of it. So ownership is established when an individual possesses the specific portion of that resource. So you go out and you begin to collect firewood. The firewood that you collected is now considered yours. It was off on the just open land. You've grabbed it, you've collected it, now you can sell that firewood. Okay, you can't go, yeah, whatever wood you find out there, you pay me. It's a communal resource. Whatever water you get out of that well, you come pay me. I can go and I can invest some of my sweat equity, and then I can sell that. Otherwise, it should be left as it is, and people should not be blocked from those communal assets. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, Al-Muslimun shuraka'u fi thalath, fil ma' wal kala'i wal nar. He says the Muslims are partners in three things: water, pasture, and fire. You find this in Sunan Abi Dawood and Sunan Ibn Majah. Again, the ruling of these things is that they're shared resources. They remain public assets until physically acquired. Again, water drawn from a shared well becomes the property of the one that draws it. Pasture or wood, like if someone goes out and chops down grass that they would feed animals, right, from a field, they take the grass, now they can go sell that. They've owned it once they've obtained it, and they cannot deny others access to that. Privately owned lands containing these resources require, in most cases, the owner's permission for others to access them. And the owner should not deny people access to them unless it causes harm. There's some other reasons why the owner might deny access to these resources. It could diminish the resource or completely exhaust it. There's a number of different reasons why you might deny access on private property. However, in general, it requires the owner's permission, which is recommended to give. Okay? And then, of course, as I mentioned, a lot of this stuff has to do with the governing authorities' discretion when it comes to how they set the rules. But there are some stipulations that they have to follow. The next thing mentioned by Imam Bahuti says, وَقُدْرَةٌ عَلَى تَسْلِيمِ فَلَا يَصِحُّ بَيْءُ عَابِقٍ وَشَارِدٍ وَطَيْرٍ بِهَوَاءٍ وَسَمَكٍ بِمَاءٍ وَمَغْصُوبٍ إِلَّا لِغَاصِبِهِ أَوْ قَادِرٍ عَلَى أَخْذِهِ مِنْهُ. So here he says the ability to deliver it. This is the next condition for a valid sale. It's that you have to have the ability to deliver what it is that you're selling. Therefore, and he gives some examples, the sale of a runaway, and we're talking about a bondservant, a slave, the sale of a runaway or a stray animal, a bird in the sky, or fish in water, or seized goods, like something that's been stolen or misappropriated, is invalid. The last part about seized goods, there's an exception, except to the seizing party, meaning you can sell it to the seizing party or someone able to retrieve it from them. Okay, so here we look at this condition number 5. Last week we covered 4. That part about conquered land and the sanctuary and the natural resources was an extension of condition number 4. Condition number 5 here is the ability to deliver an item. This is a fundamental condition for a valid sale in the Islamic law. The seller's ability to deliver what they are selling. And the principle behind this is that this condition ensures that the buyer receives the purchased item without undue hardship or uncertainty, minimizing potential disputes and ensuring fairness in transactions. The inability to deliver an item renders the sale invalid. Okay? So let's look at this here, some of the details. Prohibited sales due to inability to deliver. So he mentions abiq, which is a runaway slave, or a sharid, which is a stray animal, like a lost camel, wandering about. This is something that's undeliverable because the seller cannot ensure possession of the item at the time of the sale. And this was mentioned specifically by the Prophet ﷺ. That's why the Imam is using these examples. You might be thinking, oh, is this a big slave trade during Bahuti's time or whatever? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned this specifically in a hadith. He says, أَنَّ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَهَى عَنْ شِرَاءِ الْعَبْدِ وَهُوَ آبِقٍ. The messenger forbade purchasing a runaway slave. This is collected by Imam Ahmad on the authority of Abu Sa'id. Another one is, example mentioned by Bahuti was birds in the sky. Rationale, obviously, birds, they're flying freely in the sky, are undeliverable because they cannot be captured without significant uncertainty and effort. So you can't sell the bird while it's in the sky. Okay? There's an exception to that. Selling a bird while it's in the sky is if the bird is confined to an enclosed space. There's like a cage or a closed aviary, right, where they have this large, like this place here. This wasn't a cage, but it was a place where birds were kept, like something this size. Okay, like you're at the zoo. They have these large open air kind of structures to contain the birds. In that case, the sale's valid, as the bird can be delivered without undue hardship. Even if capturing the bird requires some effort, specialized skill, or time, it is plausible, right? It is possible because it's not out in the open. Right? So the sale would remain valid even if, like, hey, we're in here, it's going to take me a bit of time. I'll sell it to you, but it might be a minute before I can actually get the bird. But the bird's not going outside. It's not flying freely. So in that case, this is an exception to that. The other thing is he mentions fish in water. Selling fish swimming freely in large bodies of water, like rivers or lakes or out in the ocean, this is also an invalid sale. And that is because, again, uncertainty and the tremendous effort involved in catching that particular fish that you're trying to sell. And there's a hadith that supports this. The Prophet ﷺ says, "La tashtaru samaka fil ma'i li'annahu gharar." Says, do not buy fish still in the water because this is gharar. Gharar is a word that you'll find in this section about transactions, which is excessive uncertainty. Okay, this was collected by Imam Ahmad on the authority of Ibn Mas'ud. Again, similar to the birds, there's an exception with fish, and that's if the fish are contained or confined in an observable space, like if they're in a pond or if they're in a tank that can be easily caught, the sale would be valid. And this condition applies even if catching the fish takes a bit of time, like the bird in the closed aviary. It is something that's reasonably achievable to catch the fish in that closed off area. The next one that he mentions here, or the last one in this section, is stolen or seized goods. This is the maghsub, and we've talked about this before. You may remember when we were discussing water, making wudu, and the types of water, not only the status of the water in terms of its purity, but also the status of the water in terms of its permissibility, meaning is it halal, like you purchased it, or it's public property, or it's made available, or it's stolen, or it's seized unlawfully. So here we're back to that similar thing, that you cannot sell seized goods because you can't get them, even if it's yours. You know? Yeah, so my car was seized, but I'll sell it to you. I can't deliver it. It's mine, technically, legally, but I can't deliver it, so therefore, I can't sell it. The only exception to that is selling it to the person who seized the goods. I found the person, like, yeah, I did. You know, your car was seized. It was taken. So I could sell it to them, even if at a loss, so that I could at least recapture some of my property, or somebody who's able to retrieve my goods. You know? He's got the equipment. He's got the know-how. He's got the pickup truck. He can go and retrieve my vehicle. And in order for him to want to do that, to be incentivized, he's got to get something out of it. I'll say, look, I'll sell it to you for a good price. You just go pick it. And he goes and picks it, and he's going to buy it. So I've sold it to him. Right? The rule prevents unjust enrichment, of course, and allows the rightful owner to potentially capture some revenue. There's an avenue here to recover their property through purchase of legal means. All right, so that's kind of the concept here with these items that are mentioned by Al-Bahuti. The general concept is avoiding gharar, or excessive uncertainty. That's what we're looking at here. This is prohibited in sales. So selling undeliverable items introduces this level of uncertainty, which is detrimental to fair and transparent trade. All right, it undermines and erodes a functioning economy. If there's no trustworthiness, if the market is filled with gharar, then no one wants to be honest in their trade, and no one wants to get involved. Okay, things come to a halt, or they get very, very nasty. All right, that's for this point about. This is what should I say? Condition number 5, which is being able to deliver the item being sold. The next one, he says, وَكَوْنُ مَبِيعٍ مَعْلُومًا وَكَوْنُ مَبِيعٍ مَعْلُومًا بِرُؤْيَةٍ أَوْ وَصْفٍ يَكْفِي فِي سَلَمٍ فَلَا يُبَاعُ حَمْلٌ بِبَطْنٍ وَلَا لَبَنٌ بِضَرْعٍ وَلَا مِسْكٌ فِي فَأْرَتِهِ وَنَحْوِهِ وَلَا نَحْوُ عَبْدٍ مِنْ عَبِيدِهِ وَلَا اسْتِثْنَاؤُهُ إِلَّا مُعَيَّنًا ويصح بيع حيوان دون رأسه وجلده وأطرافه لا استثناء شحمه أو حمله ويصح بيع باقي اللاء في قشرها وحب مشتد في سنبله. Here, a little more detail. The sale item must be known. This is condition number 6. The sale item must be known, either by viewing it or through a description sufficient for deferred sales. It's known as Bay' Salam, and we'll look at that later on, the details of that. This is a deferred sale. He says, therefore, an unborn fetus in the womb. So here we're talking about an animal, okay? We're not selling an unborn child of another human being, typically. Right? We're talking about an animal here. A milk in an udder. Musk, which is what is used for the perfume, still within its gland. Okay, so the musk is produced from like a liquid inside of a gland of an animal typically. And so on, these types of things where they're unknown, they cannot be sold. It's also invalid to sell one bondservant among several others without specification, or to make exceptions unless specifically named. It is valid to sell an animal without including its head, skin, or limbs, but not without its fat or fetus. It is also valid to sell fava beans within their shells and grains once they have hardened in their husk. Okay, so there's some exceptions to this that he's mentioned specifically. So let's look at this concept in general. This is one of the essential conditions here of a valid sale. Number 6 is that the item being sold must clearly be known to both parties, the buyer and the seller. And this is because gharar, or uncertainty, in a sale is prohibited. So if you don't know what it is that you're selling or what it is that you're buying, it's uncertain. This is an uncertainty that is prohibited. It creates ambiguity and often results in disputes. Again, trade and commerce is a communal activity. Okay? It's meant to move society along in a positive manner. It's not meant to be oppressive. It's not meant to be a transgressive in nature. You're not looking to take advantage of people, but you're trying to conduct a functioning economy. Okay, and this is how it's done, by avoiding these uncertainties and ambiguities. We don't want disputes arising in the marketplace. So the knowledge of the item can be established in several ways. He mentions one, direct observation, meaning the buyer and seller must have seen the item. Okay, and this happens at the time of contract. See the item? I'm selling you these burkak here. This is what I think it's called. It's wheat biscuits. Okay, we got to know what we're buying here. I'm not going to have it somewhere else. You don't know what it is. You might even know what that name is. I just told you. We got to see it. We got to be able to understand. Okay, what is it that we're buying? All right, we got that. So I know what I'm selling. You know what you're buying. That happens at the time of contract, or it can happen previously, before the contract is concluded, but within a time frame where the item's condition would not have changed. A reasonable time frame where the item's condition would not have changed, like viewing a car or furniture, for example. If you were gonna, I saw your car yesterday, and in a couple of days or a week, you're like, hey, guess what? Remember you were complimenting me on my car, and I said, mashallah, great car. How do you like it? You're saying, oh, it's the best car I've had so far. Blah, blah, blah. It's got great gas mileage. It's really comfortable. Fits a lot of people. And I was saying, yeah, it's great. And then guess what? It's for sale. And I go, yeah, well, I was in the market. Of course, that's why I'm coming to you. I don't now need to see the car again because it hasn't been long enough, like within reason, to think that the condition of the car has changed at all. It's the same car. It's not been that long. The shelf life of a vehicle is much more than a week or 2 or 3. So the condition's been met because I previously I understood the description. I knew what the item was that was being sold. Okay, so here in this case, it was a couple days ago. The condition's going to remain consistent. Or another way is partial observation. Okay, partial observation, meaning viewing part of an item, is sufficient if it reliably represents the whole of the item. For example, if you're buying a material like fabric, it's plain fabric. It's just plain one color. To see one side of the fabric, that's enough. It's partial. I don't need to flip it over and see it. I'm not required to look at it in its entirety. If the part that I'm looking at represents the whole, then we're good to go. Another one would be the surface of a pile of uniform grains or dates. You've got a big pile of dates, for example. Like, this is the harvest from this particular type of date right now. Here it is. I don't need to go through and look at every single date or a pile of grain. If what I'm looking at represents the entire stock, that's a partial observation, which is enough. And this differs from a mixed pile of goods. A mixed pile of goods, partial observation is not sufficient in this case. So, for example, if you go to those storage facilities, you know what I'm talking about? The self-storage places. People go and they put all the extra stuff in there. Okay? They've got it filled with all kinds of things. Okay? And what happens at those places is they will hold your stuff as long as you're paying. And then if you lapse on your payment, and then there's a process they go through, and then if they can't redeem any money, then they'll sell the lot of that container. And some places what they'll do is they'll have a whole, we're all there, right? We're all there because we're pickers. That's what they call them, We're going to go pick stuff. And what they'll do is they'll have us stand there. They'll open the door, let you see what you can see. You can't go in. You can't open boxes. There's trunks, there's chests, there's packing boxes. You can look in there, and then they'll let you start bidding on it. See the concept? Like, it could be a chest full of rags, old photos, all of my kids' 3rd grade homework that I thought was valuable, and I stuffed it in there, and now we're bidding on it and we're going to sell. Or it could be collectibles, antiques, jewelry, etc. I don't know what I'm selling as the owner, and you don't know what you're buying except for this partial observation. This is gharar. It's uncertainty. So what happens when you buy it Okay, you bought it and you won the lottery with it. You realize, hey, those chests and those boxes were filled with antiques, paintings. It ended up being a couple $100,000 you bought for $1,000 or $2,000. How am I going to feel? Whoa, 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 wait a minute. We got to stop. No. Or you paid a couple $1,000 and all you got was my kid's old homework. That's uncertainty. So it's going to create animosity. It could create disputes. It's going to resemble gambling in a lot of ways. Sometimes the houses, they don't let you go and see what's inside. They let you look from outside. Yeah, you have to be able to see the whole thing. Otherwise, it's gharar. That's what happens sometimes. Sometimes they show you that they don't let you go in, and you pay the price, and you open the door and you realize, I got to dump $100,000 more in here because the place has got mold and there's water damage and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so this is the same principle, yeah. Yeah, you can't, so this type of sale is invalid. Yeah, so it's not permissible for someone to engage in the transaction, for me to go sell it like that. All right, the sale is invalid. So I could go, look, the sale's not valid. I don't have to, like, if I got involved with it, unknowingly, like, the sale's not valid. I could back out of it without a problem. It's not even a valid sale. So that's partial observation. Another way to achieve this condition of observation is through other senses, like touch, smell, taste. If those senses provide an adequate understanding of the item's qualities, then this would fulfill that condition. Like somebody that perhaps was blind and they couldn't see. They could touch the item and understand, okay, screen's not broken, everything works, I can hear. Or you might need to smell perfume, for example. You could look at it, it's clear, looks good, looks clean, but we got to smell that stuff, right? Because that's what you're after. That's one of the main qualities of perfume is the fragrance. Or a taste. So you're buying honey. You don't care what it looks like. You just want to taste it. So you taste it. And that would suffice for being able to understand the description, or at least getting a general idea. So this is a part here. These are 3 ways. The other way that he alluded to is for items that are not immediately available. Detailed descriptions will suffice for deferred sale or selim transactions. And this can replace the direct observation. This applies particularly to items that are standardized and measured, like grains, etc. All right, so there are some cases when just a description would be sufficient, and we're going to look at that later on when we get to the structures of different types of contracts. So we've got some ideas about observation. The next thing that he mentions is transactions that are invalid because the item sold is not adequately known, like a future or like a unborn, as he says, fetus, like a future item. The existence or condition is uncertain. We don't know what it is. Sample-based things, like I mentioned, we talked about piles of dates or things of that nature, but showing a sample of something without confirming the uniformity of the entire lot would be invalid. So just showing you like, oh, here's one date. If you had a pile of them, you can see, okay, the pile appears to be uniform. But if I come to you and say, here's one date, I got a pile of other dates, I got a sample for you, there's a pile of them left, this is not sufficient because these are like sample-based items. You need to be able to confirm the uniformity of the entire lot. Hidden items are also invalid sales. We go back to the honey example. Honey hasn't been extracted. The quality and quantity cannot be determined. It's an unknown item. It's just honey in general. There's many different types of honeys, flavors, viscosities, etc. And then undetermined items are mentioned there. Undetermined items, like saying, I'll sell you a computer from my inventory without specifying which one. I'll sell you, you want a computer? I'll sell you a computer. I got a bunch of them in my inventory. I'll sell you one. You don't know what's the specifications. You don't know what it's got, how much memory, what screens, etc., what's coming. You don't know any of this. It's undefined item. Or excluding an unspecified item for sale. Like, I'll sell all of my electronics except one. And you don't specify which one that is. And this also creates ambiguity in the contract. Okay, you could be, we don't know which one's going to be excluded. You know, here's my electronics. I got this remote, I got this phone, and I have this tablet. I'll sell you these. You might be able to say, like, okay, calculate. There's a tablet there. It's like $800, and there's a phone there. That's another $700, and there's a remote there. That's like $10 on Amazon. I'll sell you my electronics except for one. And we said, yeah. I didn't specify. So I could be going, yeah, I'm not selling that one. But I charged you, I mean, you know, you understand what I'm saying? Definitely wasn't excluding this one. I'll go on Amazon for that one, no problem. Okay? So that, again, creates ambiguity in the contract, which has to be avoided. If the exclusion is specific, then the sale is valid. I'll sell all of my electronics except for this phone. So now you know what my electronics are being, the ones that are being sold. Just one item in a whole list of inventory without specifying it is enough for there to be gharar. All right? In this type of example here. And then he mentions very specifically sales of parts of animals. He says about not selling the animal without its, you know, head and skin, etc. He says valid to sell an edible animal excluding its head, skin, and limbs. These are parts that are typically not consumed. However, excluding its fat or unborn offspring is invalid because they remain unknown. How much content of fat is there, etc. And then he mentions the permissibility of selling like legumes or grains in their husks or in their shells. Right? This is like when we're getting ready for produce season. Okay, and we see there's definitely a produce there. It's just got to be harvested, and it's gotten to a point, and there is a definable point when you can do that, when you can sell them while they're still in their husks or their shells. However, there is a point in which it's permissible to do that without having really observed or understood the exact nature of the product, because there's a need for this type of sale. There's a need for this type of sale, and this is a condition that's generally understood. So that's condition number 6. The 7th condition, Imam al-Bahuti, he says, وَكَوْنُ ثَمَنٍ مَعْلُومًا فَإِنْ بَاعَهُ بِرَقَمِهِ أو بما ينقطع به السعر ونحوه أو بألف ذهب وفضة لم يصح ويصح بيع الثوب ونحوه كل ذراع بدرهم لا منه كذلك. Okay, so the first part is, this is the 7th condition, by the way. This is وَكَوْنُ ثَمَنٍ مَعْلُومًا, meaning that the price has to be known. He says, فَإِنْ بَاعَهُ بِرَقَمِهِ, if it's sold at the numbered price, this is what's been marked on the item, or بِمَا يَنْقَطِعُ بِهِ السِّعْرِ, or this is what means the prevailing market rate. What's the going rate for the item? Or for 1,000, he says here, أو بألف ذهبا وفضة, meaning a combination of currencies. I'll sell it, or the price is 1,000 in mixed gold and silver. So here you need to think about 1,000 pieces in mixed gold and silver. Not like $1,000, okay? Because that's a specific value. You need to understand the difference. 1,000 coins I'll sell it for 1,000 coins of quarters, nickels, and mixed quarters, nickels, and dimes. Just 1,000 coins, quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies. So the price is, right, you could have a discrepancy there depending on what type of amounts you put together, like gold or silver. Gold is typically more valuable than silver is, so you could bring 999 silver pieces in one gold piece. It's a mixed lot. However, the value is very different than 999 gold pieces in one silver piece. This is a huge discrepancy there. The price here is unknown. Okay? These sales are invalid. He mentions these numbers. We're going to look at them specifically. And also, he says, وَيَصِحُّ بَيْءُ ثَوْبٍ, it's permissible, the sale of a garment or a similar item, each cubit for 1 dirham. The cubit, remember, is a measure of length. However, this is valid. However, meaning we're talking about selling a portion of a larger item by measure. It could be a long item. It's like basically having a unit of measure per price, like $10 per yard. Okay, that's valid. And then they start rolling it out, and then you calculate it. It's known. It's calculatable. However, selling a portion of it in the same manner is not valid. Sell a portion of that bolt of material. Say, I'll sell it for $10. I'll sell a portion of it for $10 a yard. So, you know, if you see the bolt of material, a portion of that means any part of it. I might cut the bolt in half, and I'll sell that for $10 a yard. Or I might, you know, so here we're not being specific. It's unknown here what's happening. So this is, as I said, this is condition number 7. The price, the thaman, must be known to both contracting parties at the time of the contract. And this is clarity. We know what's happening. It ensures mutual understanding and prevents future disputes. And the price may be determined through direct observation or inspection of the goods, as we've discussed previously. Right? Sometimes prices are like that, right? This for that. This thing for that thing. Okay? Remember, we're talking about wealth in general. Clear and sufficient description that leaves no room for ambiguity. For example, a sale involving a specific amount of grain measured by a standardized container is valid because the parties can ascertain the price by referring to an external measure. They tell you this amount of grains, it's going to be by weight, or it's going to be by volume. So here, when he talks about the initial invalid sales, clarifying price, selling at a marked price, biraqmihi, such as the price written on a tag, is invalid unless both parties know of that price and explicitly agree on the amount. You have to know. It could be marked, and then the seller's marked it some time ago, and he's like, oh, the value, the market value, the value of this has changed. It's just the number that's on there. They have to agree. They have to both know, and they have to agree to it. Selling the item at a prevailing market price. This is just like the going rate. Or what others are being charged for it is invalid because such terms also leave the price undefined. I'll buy that from you. Sold. What are you going to sell it for? Well, I bought it for the going market rate. I bought it for what you sold it to that guy for. Like, yeah, no, that's not good because I was giving him the 5-pillar discount, you know. So these things have to be understood and very clear. They have to be stated. Sale involving mixed currencies, I highlighted what that means before. Valid sales with specific units. It's valid to sell divisible goods, like garments, grain, or livestock, for a fixed price per unit, like $1 per arm length of fabric, or $1 per scoop of grain, or $1 per, etc. The total quantity need not be known if the price per unit is clear. So you could say, like, I'll sell you. He says, I want to buy 50 yards of this fabric, and you say the fabric is sold $2 a yard. Valid. Sold. Done. Because he can go, okay, well, 50 yards times 2 is I'm going to get, what's that? $100. No problem. It's sold. Finished. He doesn't have to say, okay, that's $100. It's not required that they say $100. The total is $100. What's required is that they can calculate what the total is that they're going to spend. They say, look, we're selling sheep here at the farm. It's $250 an animal. It goes and rounds up 10 animals, comes up. He says $250 a piece. They start calculating, gives them the price. We're done. The invalid partial sale, as I mentioned before about this last line, which is a bit tricky. He says, وَيَصِحُّ بَيْءُ الثَّوْبِ وَنَحْوِهِ كُلَّ ذِرَاعٍ بِدِرْهَمٍ لَا مِنْهُ كَذَلِكَ. Meaning here, we're using some words min. Using the term min is from a thing. وَيُفِيد التَّبْعِيد. Which is basically what's the right way to say that? A part or a partial, a part of the item, as opposed to al-kul, which is the entirety of it. So this would invalidate the sale because you've created an ambiguous transaction. As I described, you're taking one bolt of fabric, which is 3 feet across, and you're selling it by the yard long, so you're getting 3 feet by a yard for $2, and you say, I'll sell that for $2, I'll sell part of that for $2 a yard. Which part of it is going to be sold? Only 2 feet of it, of the bolt, or a foot of the bolt, or 2.5 feet, right? You're going to give me a yard of it, but you might take away some of it in another way. So that creates some ambiguity there. You have to remove that from in order for the sale to be valid. It has to be understood. I'll sell you this for this amount. It can't be I'll sell some of this or a portion of this for this amount per yard. It has to be the entire item. Otherwise, it's just not specified. So the general principle here is that ambiguity in price or in goods invalidates the sale. Okay, clarity and specificity, they are essential for ensuring fairness and preventing disputes. The last thing we're going to look at quickly, he says, وَمَنْ بَاعَ مَعْلُومًا وَمَجْهُولًا صَفْقَةً صَحَّ فِي الْمَعْلُومِ بِقِسْطِهِ مَا لَمْ يَتَعَذَّرْ عِلْمُ الْمَجْهُولِ فَيَبْطُلُ فِيهِ مَا إِن لَمْ يبين ثمن كل وإن باع مشاع بينه وبين غيره أو عبده وعبد غيره مثلا بلا إذن أو خرا وخلا وخمرا صح في ملكه بقسطه وللمشتري الخيار. So this means whoever sells a known and unknown item in one transaction. We talked about the nature of the items being known. So they're going to sell one known and one unknown. In one transaction, it is valid for the known item at its proportional price, unless knowing the unknown item is impossible, in which case both sales are void unless the price of each is specified. If someone sells an undivided share of something which is jointly owned, their bondservant along with another's, or a free person, or if he sells vinegar and wine together, then the sale is valid based on its price when the with the buyer having the option to choose. So there's two things here we're looking at, is a combined sale. There's a combined sale in all of these cases. But the first is a combined sale of something which is known and unknown. And the second case is a combined sale of something which is permissible with something impermissible. Like something that's legitimate, that's legally sellable versus something that's legally not sellable. Okay, so this combined selling refers to an agreement that is struck at one time with two items, both sellable and unsellable. Okay, sellable because it's known and it's legal, or unsellable because it's unknown or it's illegal. So if the seller combines a known and an unknown item in a single transaction, the sale is valid for the known item proportionate to its share of the price, but invalid for the unknown item. If it's possible to determine the nature of the unknown item, such as selling a specific horse and the offspring of another horse for a lump sum, the entire sale is invalid. It's because the unknown item cannot be validly sold due to its uncertainty. The known item's price cannot be separated from the total, leaving it effectively unknown. In this case, you have a specific horse and the offspring of another horse. And they've said it's for this amount of money. One price. They didn't distinguish the horse costs this and the offspring of the other horse costs that. And we can't determine the two. We don't know the other product, which would be the horse's offspring. We don't know anything about it to set a price on it. So the entirety of the sale would be invalid. The exception if the price of each item is specified. The sale becomes valid for the known item and its allocated price. Right? We've said this is 500 and this is 700. Where he's still selling something that's unknown, so it's an invalid sale, which would be the unborn animal. It's still unknown. Is it even living? Is it coming out with all limbs? Is it, etc.? To have that value is still unknown. But this time we know the different. We've specified the prices. This for that and that for that. In this instance, the seller has stated each item for its fixed amount, and so the uncertainty has been resolved here. So that horse that we know and we see, the price is there, it's valid for that portion of the sale, whereas the other portion is not. Then he talks about selling shared property without a partner's permission. Like selling a shared property which is jointly owned, you're selling it without your partner's permission. The sale is only going to be valid for the seller's share proportionate to its value. Okay, and he mentions here an example of bondservants or slaves, but the principle is applied in general. Trying to sell a portion of something which you're just a partner in, you can sell your stake in it, but you don't have the right to sell it in its entirety. Hey, guess what? I sold our company today. Like, no, I was letting that thing mature. I'm not leaving that. Well, I sold it. They bought. They got the papers. It's gone. No, you didn't have the right to sell. You have the right to sell your share. You can sell your share, whatever you own, and you can transfer ownership to that portion of the shared property. But I'm going to retain my stake in it. Unless, of course, the co-owner gives consent. They say, okay, great job. Or they have consent beforehand. That's how you can approach these things in general. So the sale cannot bind the co-owner unless they've, as I mentioned, given they've given explicit consent. And the buyer, in this case, has the option to keep the share that was valid or to rescind the sale in entirety due to the divided nature of the transaction. Like, I'm not looking to be a partner in this. I want the whole thing or I want none of it. And you didn't tell me there was a partner as the buyer. And when I found out there's a partner, I'm going to rescind my offer now because I'm not looking for partners. You see, so I could either, as the buyer, I could say, okay, fine, no problem, I'll take your share. Or I can say, look, I'm not doing it. Even after we've concluded the majlis is already concluded, and then we come to find out after the fact, oh wait, there's a partner here. Now I have the option, right? I have the option to back out. However, if the buyer knew of the shared ownership beforehand, he knew that this was a partnership deal he was going into, they have no right to rescind the sale after it's concluded. Like this is not like you're not being tricked, or you're not led into an uncertain transaction. You know that this is a partnership, and you're buying a portion of it, not its entirety, because you know that you don't have the right to rescind your sale. The sale is valid; it's yours. Khalas. All right, because basically, when you agreed, you accepted the nature of that partnership. As I said, he mentions specifically about slave trade. Or he says, if a person sells their own slave and a slave belonging to someone else without the other's consent, the sale is valid only for the one that they own at its proportional price. Again, this is something that is not applicable today. The concept is still there, as you can see clarified previously. But yeah, this was something that they had to contend with. Selling lawful and unlawful items. Okay, so the seller includes, for example, a lawful vinegar and unlawful wine in a sale. As we understand, vinegar is permissible and wine is not. The transaction would be valid only for the lawful portion, and it would be proportionate to its share of the price. Okay, so they said, I'm selling this, there's this stock of vinegar and stock of alcohol wine, and I'm selling it for $1,000. So the sale would only be valid for the vinegar at the proportion of that price. So we'd have to figure out what that is. So if the buyer is unaware of the situation, if they don't know the nature of this, they have the option to retain the validly sold item at its proportional price, or to reject the entire transaction due to the division of the sale. If they were aware that they're going into this and there's going to be a division of price, again, much like the previous example, they have no right to rescind the sale for the valid portion. And the way that you calculate that, the unlawful or unsellable item, so it doesn't just include the unlawful, but it also includes the unsellable item, like trying to sell a free person. Right there, he's on the block, we're selling him. It's not a saleable item. All right, so the unlawful or unsellable items, they're estimated. The unlawful and unsellable items are estimated as if they were lawful. So for the example of wine and vinegar, you would treat the wine as if it was vinegar, and you would estimate its price based on that. You would calculate the proportional value of the lawful item. So to determine the proportional value in such scenarios, you would assess the value of each item, add their values together to determine the total, calculate the proportional share of each item's value relative to the total, and apportion the agreed sale price according to those proportions. You would say, okay, there's 40% of this and 60% of that. This costs this is valued at this much, and this is valued at that much, and therefore the market price is proportionate to those numbers. And that's how you would determine the price for the valid sale of that particular item. Is that clear? It's like a person sells their own car, and they try and sell a car belonging to someone else without their owner's consent. So the sale would be valid for the seller's car. I'm selling my car, and I'm selling Tarek's car. Tarek just doesn't know his car is being sold today. And I'm going to sell my car. I'm selling these two cars for $40,000. And you're like, 2 cars, 40 grand. Done. Sold. Car A, that's my car, is worth 30 grand, of course. Tarek's got a 10 grand car. Sorry. That's why I'm the salesman, man. You know? Yeah. I've been doing this for a minute, okay? I already sold Abu Meyer's car last week. It's gone. Yeah. Yeah. Okay? 40 grand total. Abu Zaid bought both cars for 40 grand. 30 grand mine, 10 grand for yours. That's what yours is worth. He didn't know this is 30, this is 10. He just bought 2 for 40. Since the seller, that's me, doesn't have the right to sell car A, which is mine, and car B, Tarek's car, the sale is invalid for Tarek's car. It's only valid for mine. So the proportional value of the cars and the total price is calculated based on their value. So I said mine's 30 grand, which makes up 3/4 of the total value of $40,000. And therefore, the buyer's going to pay 3/4 of the agreed price. Okay, so typically there would be like a markup. You would determine its value, and then you could determine the markup. However, in this case, the markup's already there, or the value that I've assigned the car is already there, and he would only be on the hook, legally on the hook, to pay for the valid sale, which is mine because I own it, and not Tarek's car because I don't own it. And that's where we wrap up for this evening.
That is for 30,000?
Mine's for 30,000, yeah.
But here it says when you sell the payout, so he has a choice. But the reason he bought it is because there's 2 cars.
He could.
He didn't know that.
He could rescind. He could rescind if he didn't know.
But if I want to buy it, like proportionally, the car really is not 30,000. Maybe his one is 30,000, and I get it for 10.
You get his for 10.
Yours 10.
Well, I'm selling mine for 30.
If you say no, that means it doesn't go through. But you are not hooked either.
If you knew, if you know, yeah, if you're going into it knowing,
He didn't know. No, the buyer didn't know.
yeah, then in that case you retain the right to rescind the offer.
That's the only thing you can get, but you can't get him. You know?
You could get him back, you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it for this. Yeah, you have the right to rescind if you've been tricked. Yeah, because of the ambiguity that you've created in the transaction, the buyer has the right to rescind. In the event that the buyer knows, they go into the scenario knowing these details, then they don't have the right to rescind because they've agreed to something that they know. And then they're on the hook for the valid sale.
That is really considered like a khayana, like, this is like your, like I say, deceiving, covering. I mean, why don't you supposed to say, hey, sell this car? You call on me. Why you bring another one before, like salesman? Bring it from somewhere, wow, 2 cars.
Yeah, 2 cars for the price of whatever, yeah, to make a deal.
So that in itself is,
I mean, you could take 2 products, no problem, if they were valid products, and you can put them together and create a price structure that makes more sense for the buyer. This alone costs 5, and this alone costs 5. I put them together and I go 8 for the thing. I don't even tell you what's what. I'm just 8 for the whole thing. And you go, bet, I'll take it for 8. That makes sense. Otherwise, I'm paying 5 for that and 5 for that. It's $10 altogether. You put them together for me all of a sudden. Now you've given me a price. You didn't say, yeah, okay, we'll bring this one down to 3 and this one stays at 5. I didn't give you that detail. I just threw it together on the spot.
but that is yours, you own it.
Of course, I own it. Yeah, but he's there, and I've I don't know. Yeah, I mean, who knows why? I don't live in that world. Why people would do those types of things to make a quick buck.
And then I have another question, and it's about the items that people buy. One habit came into my mind, so I was looking at it in the market, and then the guy put, we have this example of the Daytona Spectre or something, but you have to see it, and you can put the good stuff in the bag, and you don't know, you think this is really good quality, like in the top right.
Yeah, if you hide, yeah. If you're hiding the poor quality, yeah, then this is a.
So that is, if someone buys it and finds out that he pays for it.
Then you find that what you were able to see wasn't representative of the whole. Yeah, then you'd have a case there to rescind.
But nowadays, you know what? There is another way they do it. Except that people don't even see it. And I go, I see they're done in the supermarket. If you buy a lemon green lemon, right?
Mm.
You never see it in a clear bag. You see it in a green mash.
Green mesh.
Very green mesh. Looks so beautiful.
Okay.
You take it home, it's not a good one. The orange with an orange color one, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is deceiving, isn't it?
So it could be a type of deception.
Yeah.
There's tactics.
Yeah. So it's marketing ploys.
They call it marketing, but that's
Yeah.
not in Islamic.
You have to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever I would go to the market with my father-in-law previously.
Yeah.
He's from Sudan, and we'd go into the market, and he would be opening all the stuff, and I'm thinking, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's what he said.
He's like, I gotta know what's in here, man. I mean, I gotta see what I'm being sold.
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, some of that stuff, you know.
Last store, they have this line, orange, whatever it is. I just take a little bit on the side of, I just peek in and I say,
Yeah.
you see, they don't-
See how it's looking.
Yeah, it looks, yeah, they don't care what they say, but they don't do that. No, I'm being deceived. Why am I that fool? I gotta find exactly what it looks like. But that should be allowed in Muslim countries, so here, it's marketing.
Sure. Yeah. And you would have the right, if you got home and found out that it was misrepresented, you'd have a right to rescind the sale and basically return it. And most places they're not.
They will return it for you.
Yeah, they take it right away.
You say, I don't want it.
Yeah, but a vendor, like I'm a vendor, it's just me. I might be like, sorry, no, all sales are final. You should have checked it out. All sales are final, because that's some places are like that.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah, sorry, you bought it. It's yours. Buyers keepers, losers, weepers. Yeah. All right, that's what we'll conclude. Jazakallah khair for your attentive listening.